Hello and welcome to the couch. Today we're going to do a little bit of a shorter episode because I just want to talk about the MVP race. A little bit over the mid-season mark, but still important to talk about the MVP race because it's really close right now, and it's really between four guys in my eyes, and then you have a fringe, couple of people, but honestly, it is between Drake May, Matthew Stafford, JSN, and Jonathan Taylor. We're going to be going in that order. So Drake May, then we're going to talk about Matthew Stafford, JSN, and then Jonathan Taylor. So, like I said earlier, I want to talk about the MVP race, and I want to go ahead and outline my criteria for the MVP. First, team success. The team success has to be there. When you look at previous MVP winners, they're all on good teams, or at least the majority of them are. And you have to do a lot to be on a bad team and still be the MVP because, you know, how valuable are you really if your team isn't good? So that's the first criteria. And, even going back to last year, I think Joe Burrow had probably the best stats out of anyone, and he didn't even really get considered for the MVP conversation. I think that if the Bengals were better and made the playoffs, he probably would have won the award. Um, so let's just dive right in. Got my Qdoba drink today. I'm hyped. Had a good lunch. Um, so let's get right into it. Drake May. And this is the people's favorite. I feel like. Um, Even though I don't think that any of these guys are necessarily like not liked by people. I think because they haven't really been in talks before. Jason's young. Jonathan Taylor has been underrated for quite a bit. Matthew Stafford, he's older and he's a great QB. And then Drake May being younger and kind of being a little bit of a meme at this point. Uh, so I think this is kind of what makes the race close because normally you have somebody that you are biased towards. Especially like for me, a few years ago when Jalen Hurts is the MVP conversation, it was him and versus Mahomes really, and I thought Jalen Hurts deserved it all the way. Even though in hindsight, Patrick Mahomes had the better stats, ended up winning the Super Bowl. Not that that goes into it, but there's not really anyone that is biasing me one way or the other, and that is interesting. And it's really just based on how the team is going to play, how, um, you know, uh, that's the first criteria. Sorry. The first criteria is team success. You have to be good. And luckily, all four of these guys have it. And then number two, individual success. How great are your stats? How much are you impacting the game? What happens when you're not playing? You know, can a team take you away, or are you unstoppable? Um, that encompasses the second part, and then the third is where you are in your career compared to last year. I think that it people who come out of nowhere are at a disadvantage to players who have already been great. Because, people might look at Drake May and say, oh, well, he didn't have a rookie season like this, so maybe he should win comeback player of the year. I saw someone say that earlier, and I was kind of confused because, I mean, clearly he's in the MVP conversation, but, when you have a bounce back season, you are on comeback player of the year. And so I want to look at, their career and then this year, their impact. But really, the main two criteria are team success and individual success, and I want to kind of determine that. And also, I do want to look at strength of schedule because I do think that it matters. I think that any given Sunday is the expression, right? Any team can beat any team, but when you are playing against an easier schedule, people are going to expect more of you, and I think that's kind of what's happening with some of these guys. But let's just go ahead and dive into Drake May. All right. Drake May. First guy, he's first in passing yards, second in passing touchdowns. He's thrown 5 interceptions, and he's pretty up there with the QBR. But also, I think the main thing is that he is at 72% completion pretty much. He's at 71.9. And that's the thing that everyone looks at, right? Like, wow, he's been so accurate. He's been so accurate this year, and he's not just checking the ball down. A lot of his highlights are really great deep throws. To Pop Douglas, to Mac Hollins. He had a great throw last week to Kyle Williams. And in that Bucks game, while I don't think from a box score standpoint it did a lot for his MVP case, there were some crazy plays, man. I mean, had 3 defenders around him, made a great throw over the middle, and I think that with the supporting cast he has, he's doing fantastic, and he's clearly in the MVP conversation. Like I said, leading the league in yards, but I will say that I don't think that he's my MVP. Um, I know that the supporting cast really isn't there. He doesn't have a great supporting cast as Matthew Stafford, but I think that this New England Patriots team is really good all the way around. I think that last year they were my dark horse candidate to make the playoffs because of how many moves that they made in the offseason, especially in the defense. I mean, the defense is way better. I mean, it's insanely better. Christian Gonzalez being back is huge. And so even like against the Bucks, I don't think their offense particularly played super well, but they were able to get stops consistently against a great Bucks team. And that's what ended up winning them that game. And look, obviously, the Patriots are 9-2. They have the team success. That's not a question. Um, and I wouldn't be mad if he won MVP. But I think that if you're talking about the most important player to a team with team success, it's got to be somebody else. But don't discount a great season. I mean, 20 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. That's amazing. I would like to see him get even more. I think when I look back to previous quarterbacks who've won the award, they're up to 35 or 40 by the end of the season. And so I want to see that throughout the last few weeks. And then let's go ahead and move on to Matthew Stafford. And at the end of the video, I will completely rank them on who my MVPs would be, who I would give my first through fourth vote or whatever. Next up, Matthew Stafford. And this is kind of the case for him, right? 25 touchdowns, leads the league, 2 interceptions. 2. He's fourth in passing yards. But have the Patriots had their bye? I don't believe they have. So playing with one less game than Drake May. Let me double check that first. I don't believe that. Anyways, but Matthew Stafford has been elite, and while he does have Puka, Puka did miss some time. He's also had Devontae Adams. He has a great play caller in Sean McVay, but I don't think you can hold those things against MVP candidates. That was kind of my argument for Saquon last year. Everyone said, "Oh, Saquon has 2,000 yards because of the offensive line." Yeah, but it's also because of Saquon. I mean, you cannot look at that and say, "Oh, well, since he had a good supporting cast, he's not the most valuable." Look at what DeAndre Swift did a year prior. He only got 1,000. Like, it's not. It is dependent on the player. The player affects everything. There's so many variables in football. It's not just a one-player thing, obviously. But what happens when you change one variable and swap it out, and then you see how the rest of everything acts? And that's why last year I thought Saquon should win MVP, or should have, been higher in the voting. Why is the ESPN low-key staying? But Matthew Stafford, the Rams are probably the 2 or 3 seed in the power rankings for me. I still have the Eagles at 1 because of the strength of the opponents they've taken down, and they've lost a few embarrassing games, but no more losses than anyone else. Yeah, I don't think the Patriots have had their bye. They will have their bye. Anyways, but going back to Matthew Stafford, this Rams team is amazing. I mean, and I just don't see a flaw to Stafford's game. He's such a savvy veteran. He has a great arm. He's still, decently mobile for his age and for his play style, but he can just put the ball anywhere. And the two games they lost, I mean, the Eagles won very well could have been differently. The 49ers one also could have been differently entirely. So, you know, I don't hold either of those two losses. They're not on Stafford. They're playing in a really tough division and really surviving and thriving, honestly. But I think that Matthew Stafford, while playing well, he would probably be my quarterback, the best quarterback, I would say, the number one, because he has 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Just playing amazing, amazing football. And just watching it, like, whenever Matthew Stafford the Rams have the ball, you don't think that they're going to get stopped. Um, you know, and that kind of ties into the next guy, JSN on the Seattle Seahawks. I have never seen personally a wide receiver play this, like play the position like this. Is so I can't even describe it. He's on pace for 2,000 yards, I think. Easily this would be the year to give the wide receiver the MVP, I feel like, or at least one of them. He has, 63 receptions. He's fifth in receptions, first in yards, 5 touchdowns. And that's the one thing I think you could hold against Jason. He doesn't have the most touchdowns. He's tied for 14th with a few guys. Um, and I think that's what's going to hold him back from the MVP conversation. And that's why I think he'll win Offensive Player of the Year, because of the touchdowns. That's what held Saquon back last year. I mean, Saquon and Jonathan Taylor put up similar numbers, but Jonathan Taylor has 16 rushing touchdowns to Saquon's, I think, like 7 or maybe even lower than that around this time. So, I think that's what held him back from being in the real MVP conversation last year, and that's what's going to do that to JSN. Wide receivers historically, I don't think they've ever won it, and it's going to severely affect his MVP case. But, geez, I mean, what a completely different team this is when JSN is popping on. I think the biggest example is Thursday Night Football, Seahawks versus Cardinals. First half, they kind of took JSN away for the most part. And, once you got later into the game, it just, he popped off. The Seahawks started going crazy. And even though the Cardinals started coming back a little bit, you never really felt that it was out of hand for the Seahawks. Team success there, obviously. Seahawks 7-2 matching the Rams. And I think that another reason that JSN won't win the MVP is because Sam Darnold's going to get a lot of the credit. It's inherent that if you are dependent on someone else playing well, they're going to get some of the credit. And Sam Darnold can throw the ball somewhere else. He can continue piling stats that aren't with JSN. And so that makes it really hard for a wide receiver to win. And that's why I don't think he would win either. But, playing really well. And the case would be that he's on pace for 2,000. And if he hits 2,000, I think you have to give him at least some votes, right? It depends on how well the quarterback race is going. But historically, whenever there's kind of no quarterback that's really, popping off in the MVP conversation, that's when a running back wins it. And I think that maybe if Matthew Stafford and Drake May slow down, or they lose a few games and JSN just keeps going, that would be how he wins it. That would be the path to the MVP. But like I said, it's going to be really, really hard for him, and I just don't know if that's going to happen. But if he gets 2,000, I'm all for it. That's an insane stat in a single season for a receiver. And then lastly, Jonathan Taylor. Colts playing well beginning of the season, 8-2. And on the bye this week, the Colts have struggled the last few weeks. Losing to the Steelers was not a great look. I mean, the Steelers defense kind of started to um, get uh, together. They're the highest paid defense. They should be playing like that. But I think you realize how dependent this team is on Jonathan Taylor. Um, you look at the Falcons game. He's the sole reason they won that game. Daniel Jones was not playing well. Same thing with the Steelers game. The only reason that they were in that game was because Taylor was able to, you know, provide life. Um, Even though they had 6 turnovers, it was only a one-score game. You look at all the things he's done this season. I mean, this is it's just 60 plus yard runs. I think he's the longest rushing touchdown this season, putting up crazy numbers: 123 yards against Arizona, 94 against the Chargers, 153 against the Titans. He only had 45 against the Steelers, but then had 244 yards against the Falcons. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. First in carries, first in yards, first in touchdowns with 15, with rushing touchdowns with 15. He averages 6 yards a carry. That's crazy. That's insane. And he has 260 receiving yards. If you want to count like all-purpose yards, he's almost at 1,400. Like, just a ridiculous season. And I think that Taylor is the non-quarterback who has the advantage in the MVP conversation for sure, because you look at how well the Colts play when Jonathan Taylor's playing well, and look at how bad they play when he's able to be taken away. Not that that's really happened a lot this season. It's 1,100 yards. But Taylor, I mean, geez, like when you have to take the reins away from Taylor, you see the flaws in this Indianapolis team. You see Daniel Jones, is not the All Pro or you know Pro Bowl caliber player that he looked to be in the first 4 weeks or so, and it's ridiculous the season he's putting on, especially following Saquon's last year. And if he reaches 2K, and like he has 16 touchdowns, I think the record is like 31 rushing touchdowns, I believe. Um, but if he's able to get anywhere near that and hit 2K, like, come on, it's got to be Jonathan Taylor. I don't care really how well Stafford's playing or Drake May's playing. I mean, he's clearly the most valuable player to that team. And so when I'm going and I'm looking at every of those 4 players and ranking them for how well uh, they are going to be, or their odds of making the MVP. At my number one, I have Stafford. I think that because he's a quarterback, he's going to naturally get a lot of stats. He's going to accumulate a lot, and with how well he's already been playing, I think that it's going to keep going. The Rams are going to be good. They're going to make the playoffs. They might even be the 1 seed, and if that's the case, Matthew Stafford is a pretty clear shot at MVP. And then at 2, I have Jonathan Taylor. I think that if he's able to even play even better, that's how he gets the MVP. But if he continues to play like he is right now, which is amazing, I think that he will most likely win Offensive Player of the Year. And that's why he'd be at my 2. I think it's hard for voters to not give it to a quarterback, especially when there's been other great running back seasons who haven't won it. All right. And so moving into 3, I think I have Drake May. And it's really close between all those guys. It's not equal intervals, 1, 2, and 3. It's more like 1A, 1B, and 1C. And then you have Jason at 2. Because Drake May is playing phenomenal right now. And I think that, while he doesn't have as good stats as Matthew Stafford, I think that if you really watch the games, you realize how important he is to this team. Even though that the defense is great, um, you know, uh, the Rams have a great defense, the Seahawks have a great defense, and the Colts got much better defensively with the Sauce trade. You see how valuable he is to the team, but I think that Jonathan Taylor's more valuable. I think that Matthew Stafford right now is more vital to that Rams. Um, it's like it's such a, you say that and you think, wow, well, if, Drake May got hurt, whoever steps in, I think Joshua Dobbs, and if the Passionaut steps in, oh, they're going to be terrible. Yeah, but you know, I can't imagine Jimmy Garoppolo going out there. I think it's Jimmy for the Rams. I can't imagine Jimmy Garoppolo going out there and playing anywhere close to Matthew Stafford. And Matthew Stafford's playing better than Drake May. I mean, you just look at the stats. The stats are better. The stats are better through less games. And I want to see a statement game from Drake May to really submit. I want to see a 4-touchdown, 5-touchdown game. I want to see a crazy thing that says, hey, I'm right in this MVP conversation too. Against the Jets last night, only had 1 passing touchdown. He looked fine. And then, a week before that, the Bucks, he looks okay. His completion percentage isn't as high as you would like. He made some great plays, but yeah, I think that's why I have him at the 1C or the 3 position. And then going to 4, it's Jason, obviously. I think it's just going to be really hard for wide receiver to do it. A few weeks ago, my mind was a little bit different. I thought, Jason's been playing crazy good. Like, I think he definitely deserves Offensive Player of the Year. And then, Jonathan Taylor pops off against the Falcons. And while I still think he has a shot at Offensive Player of the Year, especially if he wins like the Triple Crown. But Jamar Chase won the Triple Crown last year and, didn't win it. So, but yeah, those are my MVP rankings. I think the fringe guys on the edge that I really want to see some statement performances from to even get them in the conversation. Mahomes, Lamar. I think Allen's probably not going to win it this year with the struggles of the Bills as of recent. And then I don't think Lamar would either actually win it either because of how much time he missed. But Mahomes for sure. Like if Mahomes blazes through the second half of the season, they make the playoffs, maybe even win the division. You could really see an argument for Mahomes in that being like, we already know that he is one of the best quarterbacks of all time. The idea is already there. As long as we have the string of performances that look like that, he definitely enters that conversation. And then a few other guys. Jalen Hurts. I know that might be a little bit of a hot take, but the Philly offense, while dysfunctional, still finds ways to win games. It's all through the hands of Jalen Hurts. I think he's looked good. I think he has 1 interception over the entire year. His touchdown to interception ratio is fantastic. I don't think the Eagles have become as tush push dependent as they were last year, so you couldn't really write off all those touchdowns he had. And I just think that if the second half of the season you play a lot of great opponents, we play the Lions this Sunday, you have the Bills, you have the Cowboys, you have the Commanders twice, who don't really look great, but you have the Commanders twice. You have the Bears coming off a win against Green Bay, an ugly win against Green Bay. I just think that you realize how important Jalen Hurts is to the offense. You say that the supporting cast is great, but AJ Brown's been pretty ineffective through most of the season, and they are still winning. He's finding the ways to get the ball to Dallas Goedert, who is really high up in the receiving yards category for tight ends. He's having a great season. And I think that, the defense for the first few weeks really wasn't all that good. There were definitely struggles at the cornerback position. And I think, look, he's definitely on the bubble. I mean, he's on the bubble of being on the bubble. But I still think there is a shot if he, the Eagles blaze through the last, half the season and he starts putting up real great numbers. I think he definitely enters that conversation because he was on the bubble a few weeks ago after the Minnesota game where he looked great. And then Dak is the other guy. Dak looked amazing, and then the last 2 weeks, this offense has taken a step back, and they looked really rough in that Cardinals game, just really ineffective. And I'm not really sure why, because they came out and Dak looked surgical on the field, and now is taking a step back. So I think that Dak is going to have to get back to that level. I mean, he's playing with CD and George Pickens, and that's going to be held against him if he's not playing well. So, and it's going to be held against him if he is playing well, because they're going to say, well, he's playing well, but he has George Pickens and CD Lamb. And that's just the nature of it. And so Dak is really going to have to step up. And I think Dak is kind of the Joe Burrow of last year in the sense that he will have pretty great stats by the end of the season, but the team's not going to make the playoffs or be. I don't think there's any way this Cowboys can make the playoff with how competitive the NFC is. but he's not going to make the playoffs, but he's going to have great stats up there with all the rest of the quarterbacks. So, but that is the MVP talk. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. Let me know what you guys think. Who's going to win the MVP? If you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. You know, whatever. But thank you for listening. Next week we'll be back, kind of doing a little bit of a recap. I know this is a little bit different than the normal podcast because we had like one central topic. We didn't really talk about the games this week, but yeah, next week we'll be back with that, talking about all the games, recaps, predictions, all that fun stuff. Make sure you check out all the social media stuff, TikTok. Follow me on YouKnowBall. If you have that, you should download it. It's really cool. It gives you like a little prompt, and then you get to answer. It's kind of like Duolingo or Be Real, because it'll give you like little prompts, and you can write your, it'll give you points based on if you're right or not. So like the recent one was like the Thursday night game against the Jets. It was like, who's gonna have more passing yards? Really easy, Drake May. And then who's gonna win it by how much? And then if you get those right, you get put on a little leaderboard with your points, and then you get to compete every week. So it's a lot of fun. Good way to gauge how the public is feeling about certain things, especially like diehard sports fans. You're not just asking like, hey, your buddy Jimmy from work, what he thinks about the game. You're actually looking at other people who claim to know a lot. So it's pretty interesting. Check it out. Follow me on there if you download it. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube. Add this on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever. But that's gonna be it. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next week.
This podcast is produced by Student Media. Student Media is a student organization at the University of Evansville. Student Media produces the Crescent magazine, published online and in print 3 times a semester. Student Media produces several podcasts and utilizes design, photography, video, and sound for its experimental and academic learning in journalistic endeavors and engaging storytelling. Student Media elevates the voice of the student body and connects the campus and community to important information and points of view.